Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true, disturbing stories about what happens in the deep woods every fall. Stay tuned, because when the leaves drop and the air turns sharp, strange things awaken. But before we continue, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe, and don't forget to like and share. Thank you all. Now, let's begin. Every fall since I was a kid, I'd made the trip out to my Uncle Ray's place in East Central Kentucky. Uncle Ray would call sometime around November, say something like, "Woodpile's looking thin," and that was the signal. I'd pack up for a long weekend, drive out, and spend a few days stacking firewood, checking trail cameras, and breathing air that didn't smell like pavement. That particular year, he called early. Said he'd messed up his back lifting a beam in the shed and couldn't haul the last of the wood down from the ridge. I got in on a Thursday night. The air had that late November bite cold, but not bitter. I slept fine that night, but woke early, around 6. By 8, I was packed up and heading up the trail with a canvas bag for kindling, an axe strapped to my back, and an old thermos full of black coffee that Ray insisted on making with a percolator from the 70s. The trail cuts behind the main cabin, then winds uphill for a few hundred yards before leveling out near the tree line. Past that tree line, about 300 yards up, the woods just end, abruptly. It's a weird cut like nature got lazy and decided not to reclaim what's beyond. What's up there are the ruins of an old homestead, a barn, half collapsed, and a stone foundation where a house used to be. Chimney still standing, but everything else long gone. Just bones now. We never really went up there. Not because of any story or warning. Nothing dramatic, it just didn't come up. The barn was already collapsing when I first saw it as a teenager, and Ray had always just said, "Ain't much worth the climb," if I asked. But I remembered it. The way the roof dipped in on one side. The stubbornness of the structure, like it was trying not to give in. That morning, I reached the clearing and set my gear down to catch my breath. The hill isn't steep, but it's long, and I hadn't realized how wet the ground still was until I felt my boots sink a little in the soft rot beneath the leaves. I looked at the barn. It had gotten worse. The rear half had caved entirely, but the front wall was holding, barely. You could still make out the shape it used to be. Off to the side, maybe 30 yards away, the house's stone foundation sat quiet. It had that hollow look buildings get when they've been empty long enough to forget people ever lived in them. I wasn't planning to explore. Seriously, I was just going to grab the wood pile and head back. But my wife, Beth, loves these moody, rustic fall photos. Old wood, scattered leaves, that kind of thing. So I figured I'd snap a few pictures before heading back down. I pulled out my phone, took a few from where I was standing, then walked closer to the barn to get a better angle. That's when I heard it. A sound, not loud but enough to stop me. Like someone dragging a foot through the leaves, not quickly. Slow, deliberate. There was weight in it, and it didn't sound like an animal. Animals don't move like that. They skitter, rustle, dart. This was more like someone moving carefully. I froze and waited. The sound stopped. I waited another 30 seconds, maybe more. Then I called out, trying to keep my voice casual. "Hey, just passing through." Nothing. I waited longer, listening. Still nothing. Not even a bird. That part I noticed more than anything, the silence. Like everything around had hit pause. I stepped around the barn slowly. One of the double doors had collapsed inward. The other hung at a bad angle, half off its hinges. I peeked inside. Same clutter I remembered from years ago. Chunks of old farming equipment. Pieces of wood that might have once been a wagon. The rusted curve of a stove sitting near the back. And something else. The leaves on the floor inside weren't flat. They were pulled, disturbed. A path of them, narrow but clear, leading in from the front, across the barn, and stopping just shy of that stove. It wasn't wind. There was no wind. And the way they were moved, no scuff marks, no shoe prints, just leaves parted as if by pressure from above. I put one foot over the threshold, stopped. The smell hit me. Not rot, not mildew, something else. Sharp, almost metallic, like rusted iron and wet earth with something sour underneath. The kind of smell that doesn't belong in a barn. I backed out, fast, and then, thud, from across the clearing, from the house. Not a crash, not a branch falling, just a sound like something heavy hitting the floor, then quiet. I turned to look, and everything in me just tensed. Then again, thud, same rhythm, a pause, another, like someone dropping something heavy, waiting, then doing it again. I stayed still. Then the dragging sound started again, this time from inside the house. It was slower now. Drag, drag, pause, then again. I stared at the doorway, that dark rectangle in the stone. Nothing moved, but the sound kept coming, closer, and I couldn't make myself leave. My legs weren't frozen, just confused, like they couldn't decide which instinct to follow. I said, "You okay in there?" Not loudly, just enough that someone, if someone was in there, would hear. The dragging stopped. Nothing for a few seconds. Then the leaves just outside the doorway shifted. Not a lot, just enough to notice. They pressed down flat, like someone stepped there, but I didn't see anyone. Then another spot, a few feet over, same thing. The leaves depressed slightly, then stayed that way, like something was walking, something invisible or hidden, but still heavy enough to leave a mark. I started backing away. "I'm just leaving," I said, "not here to bother anyone." I turned, then thud, right behind me, closer than it should have been. I ran, no hesitation. I just bolted. The trail was narrow and the leaves were slick, but I didn't care. I slipped once, caught myself on a branch, nearly dropped the axe. My boots kept sliding, but I didn't slow down. Behind me, I swear I heard something. Not chasing, just following, like it wasn't in a hurry, the kind of pace that makes you feel like it doesn't have to rush. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I reached the equipment shed at the bottom of the ridge. Later, I told Uncle Ray someone might have been squatting up there. I made up a line about seeing signs of activity tracks, disturbed stuff, maybe some gear. He just nodded and said, "Could be, sometimes folks pass through," but I didn't tell him the real part. I've still gone back every November since, but I haven't been past the shed. I'd taken a contract gig out in eastern Kentucky. A tiny historical society had received some grant money to document old burial sites in the hills. It was already late fall by the time I got there. Most days were uneventful. I'd drive my rental up some gravel road until the tires started sliding, then hike the rest of the way in with a pack, a laminated map, and a handheld GPS unit clipped to my jacket. Other times, I'd find nothing for an hour and suddenly realize I was standing on it. The markers almost gone, the ground subtly sunken. On November 4th, I headed out to a location the society listed as the Bledsoe ground. The only map I had of it was a blurry scan of a courthouse sketch with the plot marked in fading pencil. The last recorded burial had been in 1911. No known descendants, no paved access, just a note saying 2 miles northwest of Hawthorne's barn. That turned out to be a sagging tobacco barn, about 10 miles outside Corville, on a barely there dirt track that my GPS didn't even register. I parked in a patch of reeds, grabbed my gear, and walked in. The first mile wasn't bad. The trail dipped into a hollow, passed a creek twice, then started climbing. The higher I went, the quieter it got. That eerie, padded kind of silence you only hear deep in the woods. No wind, no birdsong, just my boots and the leaves and the occasional click of the GPS unit trying to keep signal. About halfway up the slope, I found what was left of the entrance. 2 rusted iron posts stood crooked in the ground, barely holding a length of chain that had long since broken. Behind it, a clearing sunken in the middle, like the forest had grown around a memory. I could see 4 headstones from the trail, with more likely buried under the brush. I spent maybe 40 minutes there. Logged coordinates, snapped photos, sketched out the layout in my notebook. Most of the stones were too weathered to read, except for one. A small, rounded headstone near the back. It just said, "Mother, 1864. No name, no epitaph. I brushed some lichen off with my sleeve and took a few pictures. That's when I saw something through the trees. To the east, maybe 30 or 40 yards off, there was a figure standing between two poplars, perfectly still. I squinted. Looked like a person, tall, maybe wearing a coat, but not moving. At first, I thought it might be a hunter. The area wasn't technically private, but I hadn't seen another person all week. I raised a hand, gave a casual wave, nothing. I called out, "Hey, just doing survey work, don't shoot or anything." Still nothing. No wave, no shift, no reaction at all. I looked down at my GPS again to double-check coordinates. When I looked back up, the figure was gone. Just trees, no sound, no branches cracking, no leaves rustling. I stared for a while, trying to figure out where they could have gone. It didn't make sense. The forest was thick, but not that thick. I would have heard something if they moved. I packed up and decided to head out. It was getting later than I liked to stay out anyway, and I didn't want to navigate those trails after dark. But when I started walking, the path felt wrong. The slope was steeper. The terrain twisted slightly in a way I didn't remember. The creek, which should have been on my right, was now on my left. I stopped, turned around to get my bearings, expecting to see the rusted posts behind me. They weren't there. No clearing, no sign of where I'd just been. I stood still for a full minute, tried to stay calm, pulled out the GPS again. The screen glitched. It flickered once. The battery icon, which had been full earlier, was now blinking red. Then the screen just shut off. I pulled out my phone, even though I knew I had no signal, not even one bar. That wasn't unusual. What was weird was that the compass app wouldn't load, just a spinning wheel. Like it couldn't find me. I decided to head downhill and try to follow the slope out. That usually worked. Most of these ridges drain into the same few creeks. I figured I'd recognize a crossing point or even stumble back onto the road eventually. But after 20 minutes, the forest still didn't look familiar. I came across a narrow ravine I didn't remember seeing on the way in. I crossed it carefully, using a fallen tree as a bridge. On the other side, I saw something through the trees. A shape, a structure. At first I thought it was a shed, or maybe a deer blind, but it wasn't. It was a bus, a full-size school bus, half buried in ivy and leaning slightly to one side, no wheels, resting on cinder blocks. Rust streaked down the yellow paint like tears. The windows were busted out, but the front door was intact. There was no road anywhere near it. No path. Nothing to explain how it got there. I should have left. I should have taken one look and backed away. But I didn't. I stepped up, opened the door, and climbed inside. The air was thick, like something had been trapped in there too long. Most of the seats were gone, just ripped out bolts and torn linoleum on the floor. Only the last 2 rows remained. The walls were covered in carved initials, little hearts, crude drawings. It looked like kids had used it as a hangout spot at some point, but not recently. I walked slowly to the back. That's where I saw it. A woman's coat, dark green, wool, draped neatly over the back of the last seat. Not dusty, not mildewed. It looked clean, almost new, and, on top of it, a folded newspaper clipping. I picked it up. It felt real, old. The paper was yellowed but not brittle. The date at the top read November 9th, 1973. The headline, 3 missing in Little Elkhorn Hollow, last seen near bus wreck. I stared at the grainy photo. Same bus, same dents, same number painted on the side. I turned the clipping over in my hands. The ink smudged where my fingers touched it, and then I heard it. Footsteps, metal footsteps. Behind me, slow, deliberate. I spun around. Nobody was there. The air felt tighter suddenly, like the space had gotten smaller. I backed out, fast, stepped off the bus and into the trees. The sky had gone darker than it should have been. The sun shouldn't have been down yet, but the forest looked like it was already in shadow. I ran, didn't think, didn't check direction, just ran. Branches whipped my arms. I lost my footing more than once. I just kept going until my legs gave out. Eventually, I leaned against a tree, gasping. I pulled out my phone again. The compass worked. North was to my left, which meant the creek should have been that way. I followed it. 15 minutes later, I saw my car. I climbed in and drove. Didn't stop until I was back in Corville. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed to finish the contract, but I never went back north of Elkhorn Ridge. I've been helping my cousin Clay with his firewood deliveries that fall, just trying to make some cash before winter settled in. He had this solid little side hustle going, running a route through a few counties on the Tennessee side of the Smokies. That November had come in early and sharp, and business was booming. We were already 5 days behind schedule, but no one was mad about it, just cold and eager. Clay had the whole thing mapped out to the hour, and I just followed his lead. He was 6 years older, knew all the back roads by memory, and had this unshakable sense of direction I relied on way too much. That morning, our fourth drop was supposed to be out near a place I'd never heard of. Danner's Hollow. Sounded made up. The customer had left a voicemail on Clay's old flip phone saying to drop the wood by the smokehouse and leave the invoice under a brick. No need to knock or call. It's all set up, he'd said. Sounded simple. Too simple, honestly. I remember Clay squinting at the GPS as we left the highway, muttering about how the pin didn't match the road names. But the map showed a path, and we followed it. First paved, then gravel, then something you'd only call a road if you were being generous. Just twin ruts through leaf muck, winding through thick woods. No signs, no houses, nothing but bare trees and the occasional ditch full of brown water. And then those bones. Scattered along the right side of the trail, maybe 30 feet apart, were what looked like animal bones, maybe deer. But they were too clean, not picked over by animals or rotted. Just white, arranged kind of deliberately too, like someone had leaned them up like driftwood along the ditch. We didn't say anything for a while, just kept driving, slower now, until Clay finally killed the engine and let the silence stretch. "This doesn't feel right," he said. And he wasn't wrong. The air had that weird, wet, cold feeling, like the woods were holding their breath. The GPS pin said we were there, but the place looked abandoned. Trees packed in tight on both sides, and the road behind us already disappearing under fallen leaves. I told Clay I'd walk ahead and check for the house. Maybe there was a turnaround spot up the hill we couldn't see yet. I followed the trail on foot, boots squelching in the mud. After a couple 100 yards, I saw it. A green metal roof tilted and rusted at the edges, barely visible through the trees. The structure underneath was more a shack than a cabin. Looked like someone had started building, then stopped about 30 years ago. There was a smokehouse behind it, door swinging open on one hinge, and off to the side, an old lawn chair laying on its side in the tall grass. Not a car in sight. Not a sound either, just this eerie stillness like the world had forgotten the place. I waved Clay forward. He pulled the truck up slow and parked it just off the trail. We got to work unloading the wood, stacking it beside the smokehouse like the guy had asked. It was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. More like the air was waiting for something to happen. About 10 minutes in, Clay stopped moving. He just froze with a log in his hands. I turned to ask what was up, but then I saw it too. A man, standing just beyond the smokehouse, half hidden by the corner of the building. He wasn't doing anything, just there, standing still, arms at his sides, mid-60s maybe, pale skin, white hair, soaking wet from the chest down like he'd been caught in a downpour. But the sky was dry, the ground was dry. No signs of recent rain anywhere. I lifted a hand. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just dropping off your order." He didn't move. Didn't blink, didn't even twitch. Then he turned, not toward us, not toward the house, just turned away, slow and steady, and walked into the woods. No urgency, no limp, just disappeared into the trees. We didn't follow, we didn't even talk. We just started stacking faster. I slipped the invoice under the brick and we booked it back to the truck. Clay turned the key. The starter clicked, but the engine didn't turn over. He tried again. Nothing. Battery read fine. Tank was full. Everything looked normal, but the engine wouldn't even try. I got out, checked under the hood, terminals were clean, no leaks, no loose wires. Then I noticed the temperature gauge. It had spiked red. The engine hadn't even started, but the needle was pegged like we'd been running for hours. That's when the radiator fan kicked on, full speed, roaring loud in the dead quiet. It made no sense. Clay swore and slammed his hand on the dash. I turned to look back toward the smokehouse. The door, which had been open, was now shut. Not swinging, not halfway shut tight. We hadn't touched it. Nothing had. The woods were still dead silent. Not a bird, not a rustle. Nothing. I pulled out my phone, no signal. Walked uphill, holding it above my head like that'd help. That's when I noticed the road was gone. Just gone. Where we'd come, in gravel, mud, tire tracks, it was now just a carpet of leaves. No ruts, no trail, just forest floor, clean and undisturbed, like no one had driven there in years. I called down to Clay. He came up beside me, quiet, like he already knew. "The invoice is gone," he said. I asked what he meant. He pointed. The brick was still there, right where we left it, but the paper, completely gone. No wind, no breeze. Just gone. We left the truck, started walking back in what we thought was the right direction. After 15 minutes, we passed a tree with an old metal sign nailed into it. Crow's Nest Gap, 1.2 miles. It looked ancient, rusted into the bark, but we hadn't seen it earlier. No way we missed something that obvious. We turned around, thinking maybe we'd gone in the wrong direction. Hiked back over the ridge. The truck was gone. We didn't speak, just turned and kept walking. Around 9, I think, we started hearing something behind us. Not footsteps exactly. More like the sound of something moving just off the path. Leaves shifting in slow, rhythmic intervals. Like it was pacing us. Never gaining, never falling back. Just matching us step for step. Neither of us looked back. Eventually, we found a fence-rusted wire, sagging posts, but it meant we were close to something human. We followed it until we saw a barn, then a small house beside it with a porch light on. We just banged on the door until a woman answered, probably in her 60s. She didn't seem scared, just looked at us like she'd seen this before. She let us in, gave us water. Let us sit by her stove while we tried to explain what happened. When we mentioned Danner's Hollow, she tilted her head slightly. "Ain't been anyone living out there since Lonnie Markham died," she said. Back in '87. Next morning, she drove us to the sheriff's office. We gave our statement. They logged it, humored us, maybe even believed a little. 3 days later, they found Clay's truck 4 miles from where we'd left it, parked on a ridge. No gas, battery melted straight through. Clay left town a week later, moved to Asheville. Started a new trade, never brought up the firewood business again. The trail behind my cousin Jonah's cabin outside Harlan cuts through the woods like something half-remembered. Not quite grown over, but definitely not maintained. He's had that place going on 12 years now. Uses it mostly to hunt, fish, and escape his kids when they're being loud. That fall, he offered it to me for a week, said I could have it all to myself if I needed to unplug. According to him, the air was good, the deer were thick, and the cell service was gloriously non-existent. That part sold me. I'd just come off a weird month, nothing dramatic, just noise and burnout, and I wanted quiet. The kind that doesn't come with screen time limits or scheduled mindfulness reminders. I figured chopping some wood, reading a few books, and boiling coffee over a stove would either fix my brain or at least slow it down. The first few days were solid. Morning hikes, afternoons with an axe, evenings with bad paperback mysteries from the thrift store down in Baxter. The forest around the cabin was all reds and burnt oranges, thick leaf cover, soft trails, nothing manicured, just space. It was the 4th day when I decided to follow the trail farther than I had before. Not sure what clicked. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe I'd just gotten too comfortable. I ate a sandwich standing up, threw on my flannel, and left around 1 in the afternoon. No destination in mind. Just figured I'd keep going until it got boring or dark, whichever came first. The trail was skinny but still walkable, pressed flat in places by years of boot prints. At first, it was like every other part of the woods I'd seen. But the farther I went, the quieter it got. I don't mean peaceful, I mean empty. No bird song, no squirrel chatter. Just that thin, chilly air sliding between the trees. About a mile in, I started noticing the rocks. Little piles. Stacked stones, all roughly the same size, placed maybe 20 or 30 feet apart along the path. Neatly arranged, almost too neat. Each one had 3 or 4 flat stones at the base, tapering to a smaller one on top. They were old, mossy in parts, but the formation was sharp, like they'd been redone recently. I figured maybe it was some old forestry system, markers from when the area was logged or mapped or whatever. I paused at a few, looked them over, but nothing jumped out. No runes, no weird stains, just rocks. Still, I kept walking. Eventually, the trail split. One path veered left, dropping into a kind of natural ditch thick with brambles and wet moss. The other curled up a gradual hill, disappearing behind a dense line of trees. I picked the hill. Looked easier. That's when I saw the carvings. Started small, just initials carved into the bark. AH, MK, that sort of thing. But the farther I walked, the stranger they got. One tree had a triangle with a line running through it. Another had a circle with 4 dots inside. Then came the crude eye shapes. Not just 1 or 2, dozens. On nearly every tree for at least 50 yards. Some looked old, worn down by weather. Others looked fresh, like sap still wept from the grooves, like someone had just finished carving before I arrived. I should have turned back, but then the trees thinned out and I saw the cabin. It was tucked back in a slope, half swallowed by the hill behind it. The porch had caved in on one side. The roof slouched. It didn't look abandoned, it looked forgotten, like it had been dropped there and left to melt into the forest. It didn't look like Jonah's place. His was prefab, clean, painted. This one was hand-built, crooked, and held together by rust and rot. I walked up anyway. Still can't explain why. The front door was barely clinging to its hinges. I pushed it open and stepped inside. It smelled like wet wood and long, decayed insulation. Dead leaves blanketed the floor. One wall was lined with dusty beer bottles, all identical, all green glass. There was a mattress in the back corner. No frame, just foam and springs. It had been torn open. Mold spread across it like veins. None of that really bothered me, but the coat did. A green flannel, clean and dry, hung neatly from a nail by the door. It looked brand new. I looked down, nothing. No footprints in the soft floor. No scuffs in the dust, just that coat waiting on the wall like someone had hung it up that morning. My heart kicked up. Not panicked, just suddenly very aware that I was alone and might not be. Still, I didn't leave. Behind the cabin, the hill rose up sharply. Built into it, I saw what looked like a root cellar. Old wood door, reinforced with 2 links of chain and a rusted padlock. I shouldn't have gone near it, but I did. The lock was half busted. One chain link had already snapped. The door bowed slightly, enough that I could lean in and peek between 2 warped boards. It was pitch black inside. Still, I felt it. Heavy pressure. Not like something staring worse. Like standing next to a power line you can't hear, but your skin knows is buzzing. Then I heard it. Breathing. Low and wet. Like something massive lying on the ground, inhaling through a narrow throat. Steady and slow. Not air through cracks. Not wind. Actual breathing. I backed away fast. The door groaned behind me but held. I told myself it was an animal. A bear. A big one. But I was already walking. Fast. Back to the trail. Back past the marked trees. I hit the first stone pile again. Only now, the top stone had a clean, white line carved into it. Fresh. Past another pile. Same thing. They'd been changed. I kept walking. Didn't run yet, but I was done pretending I was alone. The air felt tight, like the forest was holding its breath. Then came the footsteps. Behind me, heavy, precise, mirroring mine. I stopped, so did they. Turned, No one there. I didn't call out. I just kept moving. Then the smell hit me. Metallic. Sharp. Like iron. Like blood. It got stronger the closer I got to the split in the trail. I passed another tree with the same carved eye, and that's when I heard the voice. Inside. Right in my chest. Like it had bloomed behind my ribs. One word. Stay. I ran. I didn't care about the trail anymore. I just went downhill. The woods blurred. Trees didn't look right. Rocks were missing. Nothing lined up. I was lost, but I didn't care. I just needed to get back. Then I heard it again. The breathing. Only now it was behind me. And above. In the trees. Branches creaked. Leaves shifted. Leaves shifted. I didn't look. At the bottom of the hill, I tripped. Hard. Ate dirt. Skinned my palms. When I looked up, I saw the edge of Jonah's cabin through the trees. Less than 50 yards. I got up and sprinted. Didn't stop. Didn't breathe until I slammed the door shut behind me. I didn't go outside the rest of the night. In the morning, I opened the front door and found a stone on the porch. Flat. Oval. Oval. Clean. Carved with the same eye symbol. I threw it as far as I could. Didn't even watch it land. I packed up a day early and left without saying much. Told Jonah I caught a stomach bug. Last time I saw the sugar maple behind my parents' old cabin, half the leaves were already down, just scattered all over the clearing like they'd given up. It was early November, colder than usual, and I'd come back to Laurel County to finally deal with the place. My dad had died a couple months earlier, August technically, though the whole timeline felt blurry, and the cabin had just been sitting there untouched since. Nobody else in the family wanted it. Most barely remembered it existed. The actual cabin is about 5 miles off the main road down this steep dirt track that looks like it hasn't been maintained since I left for college. I parked up top instead and walked the rest of the way in with a canvas pack and one of those tall camping lanterns. The cabin looked about like I remembered. Roof still held. Windows weren't busted. The porch steps were warped, but they'd been that way since I was 13. I got about 4 feet from the steps when the porch light blinked on. It's a motion sensor light. Always has been. I remember Dad grumbling when he installed it because the thing was too sensitive used to go off if a squirrel twitched its tail in the bushes. But this time, nothing had moved. I hadn't even reached the first step. I stood there for a second, just holding the lantern and listening. Nothing. Just the quiet kind of stillness that only happens deep in the woods. No wind, no animals, no crunching underbrush. The kind of silence that makes your ears feel like they're straining to pick something up. Inside, the air was stale. Not gross, just unmoved. Like it hadn't been disturbed in months, which I guess it hadn't. I flipped the thermostat, but nothing happened. The furnace was probably too old to even bother with anymore. Instead, I lit the propane heater in the corner, same one we'd used during outages when I was a kid, and started unpacking. My plan was simple. Spend one night, maybe 2 max. Go through the closets, grab anything worth saving, old photo albums, some of Mom's keepsakes, the kind of stuff people forget to care about until it's gone. The rest, I'd either haul away or leave for the cleanup crew I'd hired. It was quiet for a while, almost peaceful in that nostalgic, slightly uncomfortable way. Around 8 o'clock, just as I was writing out a list of things to box up, I heard a dull thump from the far side of the cabin. Nothing dramatic, just a muted knock, like something heavy had hit the siding once. I figured it was a branch, maybe a raccoon or a deer. The woods out back are thick, and I remember them creeping close even when I was a kid. There's no real yard, just a clearing that sort of blurs into trees. But right after that thump, the porch light came on again. I grabbed the lantern and stepped outside, held it high and scanned the edge of the clearing. Trees were just walls of black. You'd think the lantern would help, but it barely pushed the darkness back. I called out, just a short, half-hearted, "Hey," and instantly wished I hadn't. My voice sounded way too loud, out of place. No echo, no rustling in return, just silence. But when I went back inside, the heater had gone cold. I checked the tank, Full. I checked the pilot light, dead. Tried the igniter, but it didn't click. No spark, no heat. Just that faint hiss of gas that makes your skin prickle. I shut the valve and leaned in closer with the lantern to make sure everything was still intact. That's when I noticed the smell. Fresh soil. Not the damp, moldy kind that sneaks in from under a house. This was sharp, clean in a weird way, like someone had just dug a hole and the earth hadn't had time to settle yet. I shifted the heater to one side and found a dark smear on the floor. Thin, muddy, fresh. I stared at it longer than I probably should have. It stretched off into the hallway, just a line, barely wider than 2 fingers. I followed it slowly, lantern trembling just enough that I could see the light bouncing off the walls. The smear twisted once, then stopped in front of the hallway closet. That door was cracked open. That door doesn't crack open. It sticks badly, always has. You've got to brace your foot and pull hard to get it to move, and even then it shrieks like a banshee. I hadn't touched it. I didn't open it now. I just turned, walked straight back to the kitchen, and started opening drawers until I found something sharp. Ended up with a little paring knife, the kind you'd use to peel apples. Probably useless, but it felt better than my bare hands. I sat in a chair next to the front door and kept the lantern right in front of me. Next thing I knew, it was morning, or close enough. Everything was dark, but I could see my breath. My fingers were stiff, aching. The lantern had gone out. Heater still dead. My phone had no bars. Still, that soil smell had gotten stronger. It had an edge to it now, metallic, like rust. I stood slowly and saw that the smear had returned. But this time it didn't stop in the hallway. It curved deeper into the cabin, straight into the master bedroom. I followed it, one step at a time, flashlight for my phone barely making a dent in the dark. The door was open just a sliver. I leaned close. The bed had been made. I hadn't touched it. The sheets I'd folded and stacked on the corner chair were now laid across the mattress, tucked perfectly like a hotel. On the pillow, resting dead center, was something small, an acorn. I stepped back. My foot hit the floor wrong, and for half a second it shifted under me. Not creaked, not squeaked, shifted, like the wood itself bent. I stumbled, caught myself, and didn't wait for a second opinion. I bolted. Outside, the motion light flared on again. This time, I saw what it was lighting up. There was a hole in the yard, right where the old chicken coop used to stand. A clean circle, maybe 3 feet wide, no loose dirt around it. No tools nearby, just a shallow pit and something inside it. I got closer. Folded at the bottom was my coat, the one I'd left in the truck, neatly folded. Not tossed, not blown down by wind. Placed, I didn't go near it. I climbed the hill back to my truck like something was at my heels. Took 3 tries to get the engine to turn over. When I finally pulled away and looked back, the whole cabin was lit up from inside. Every single light. I drove until I reached Harper Ridge, parked outside a gas station, and stayed there until the sky lightened. Called the cleanup crew and told them to take whatever they wanted. Just get it done. Never really told anyone the details. Not that I'm hiding it, just doesn't come up. I wouldn't even know how to explain it in a way that makes sense. I was 28 when my uncle passed. He didn't have kids, never got married, and barely kept in touch with anyone besides my mom. So, when it came time to clear out his old place, the family quietly decided I was the one for the job. His cabin was way out near Larkspur Ridge, buried deep in the foothills of western North Carolina. It was mid-November when I went up. That gray, in-between part of fall when all the leaves are down but the cold hasn't really taken over yet. The sky stays the same color all day and everything feels like it's holding its breath. There wasn't any snow yet, just frost in the mornings and that soft crunch under your boots that sounds louder than it should. The cabin didn't have Wi-Fi, barely had electricity. No TV, no radio. There was a dusty landline on the wall, but when I picked it up, I just heard static. The road to get there was more suggestion than structure, barely wider than a walking path, winding around the ridge like it didn't really want you to follow it. I actually had to back up and try again at one point when my tire started to slip off the edge. My mom was the only one who really protested me staying up there overnight. She made some vague comments about bad ground and things not sitting right since the flood a few years back. I asked what that even meant, but she just shook her head and said, "You'll see." Dramatic as ever. The first 2 days were what you'd expect. Chilly, quiet, kind of boring. I swept the porch, stacked the wood he'd left half split in the shed, sorted through old toolboxes. My uncle had kept everything, even stuff that didn't work anymore. Broken flashlights, rusted screws, whole drawers of dead batteries. There was a musty smell in the place. Not mold exactly, just still air and old paper. He had notebooks, lots of them, most filled with lists. Sharpen blade, replace traps, watch the ridge. Same phrases repeated over and over. Some pages had weird sketches, like tree lines with symbols, or dots connected by lines. I chalked it up to cabin fever, nothing sinister. Just a man alone with his thoughts for too long. On the third night, I dozed off on the couch next to the wood stove. The fire had burned low, just a few red coals glowing under the grate. I woke up without meaning to. No sound, no movement, just awake. That kind of alertness that hits you before your brain catches up. I checked the clock on the wall, 3:21 in the morning. Then I heard it. A soft thud outside. Not like a knock, just a dull pressure, like something heavy had shifted its weight on the porch. I sat up and listened. My heart was already beating faster than it should have been. I told myself it was an animal. Deer, maybe a bear. Raccoon, if I was lucky. It was that kind of place. But then the motion light on the porch clicked on, and the second sound came. Not an animal sound. It was careful, methodical. Not footsteps, more like pressing. Like someone slowly testing each floorboard before trusting it with their full weight. I stood up and grabbed the poker from beside the stove. It was still warm from earlier. I walked to the front door. The curtain on the window was already pulled back. I guess I'd done that when I got there, maybe to let in some light. I leaned forward just enough to see through the glass, and froze. There was something standing out there, just past the porch railing, not moving, not doing anything, just standing. It was tall. I couldn't see its legs from the angle, but its head was level with the porch awning. The body was narrow, unnaturally so. Like someone had stretched it out vertically. The shoulders slumped forward like they were too heavy or burdened. The skin, if you could call it that, looked gray, pulled tight across its frame. No hair, no ears, just this smooth surface that seemed to reflect the porch light wrong. That's what really got me. The light didn't sit right on it. It sort of slipped, like the thing didn't quite belong in the same space as the light. I stepped back, barely breathing. It didn't move. I blinked. Just once. When I looked again, it was closer. Inside the railing now. I hadn't looked away long enough for that to happen. I know I hadn't. But there it was. Closer, and still not making a sound. My grip on the poker tightened. My whole body was tense, but not shaking yet. Just bracing. I could feel sweat on the back of my neck, cold as ice. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was panic. Maybe I just wanted to do something human to break the spell. But I raised my hand and gave it a little wave. It waved back, exactly the same way. Same rhythm, same angle, like it had been waiting for a cue. That's when I knew this wasn't a person. No matter how messed up someone might be, people don't move like that. They don't wait for you to show them how. I wanted to move, to run, but my feet were cement. I could feel the stove heat behind me, and still, I couldn't back away. Then it stepped forward again. No sound, but the porch dipped under it, like it had real weight, even though it moved like it didn't. Its face, or what I assumed was its face, shifted, not into a smile, just stretched sideways, skin pulling tight until a thin slit opened where a mouth should have been. No teeth, no tongue. Just more of that dry, cracked skin folding open and shut like it was trying to remember how mouths work. Then I heard it, someone shouting my name from behind the cabin. A real voice, human, loud. I turned, heart in my throat, and ran to the back door. Swung it open hard. Nothing. Just trees. Cold and still. No wind, no voices. When I turned back, the front porch was empty. I stepped outside, poker still in hand, and looked around. The motion light was still on, buzzing faintly. Nothing on the steps. No marks, no footprints. Just undisturbed frost. I didn't sleep after that. Just sat by the window, poker across my lap, eyes on the tree line. Every time I blinked, I half expected to see it there again, waiting. The next morning, I drove into Millbridge and stopped at a little diner off Main. Ordered coffee. An older guy at the counter looked up from his eggs and asked if I was the nephew. I said yeah. He nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting me. Then he asked, "You see anything strange up there?" I didn't answer. He didn't wait. Just said, "Your uncle used to come down after the first frost every year. Wouldn't stay past Thanksgiving. Said they start getting curious once the cold sets in." That evening, I packed everything. Whatever I hadn't finished sorting could stay. Locked the place up, got in the car and drove down the ridge without looking in the rearview mirror once. I was 17 when I stayed with my cousin for a week out in Carter Hollow, a small mountain town tucked so deep into the Appalachians that the GPS gave up about 2 turns before her driveway. My parents were in Sarasota helping my aunt recover from a double knee replacement, and instead of dragging me along, they handed me off to Jules like luggage. Not that I minded. Jules had just turned 20 and was renting this old double wide at the bottom of a hill, right off a county road with no name. People just called it the turn after the white church. Her trailer wasn't anything fancy, white siding, slow porch, the usual, but it was solid, and most importantly, it had working heat. Our place back home had a furnace that coughed more than it warmed, so I was happy just to be somewhere that didn't require wearing 2 pairs of socks indoors. She worked third shift at a Chevron out by exit 47, so most nights from 10 to 6 I had the place to myself. She'd leave with a thermos of gas station coffee and whatever microwave burrito she hadn't gotten sick of that week, and I'd stay behind with my laptop and whatever snacks I could scrounge. It was pretty chill. It was early November, right in that narrow window when the trees are mostly bald, but the ground's still buried in crunchy leaves. The kind of cold that hasn't turned brutal yet but sharpens your breath. Every step outside sounded like you were wading through cornflakes. Smoke hung in the air from someone's wood stove up the hill, and the whole area felt paused, like nobody had told Carter Hollow the rest of the world was still moving. The first few nights were quiet. I did a little schoolwork, ate a lot of microwave ramen, and watched too many horror movies I wasn't brave enough to pick when my parents were home. There was something weirdly relaxing about the silence out there. No neighbors, no traffic, no hum of city anything. Just the occasional owl or the pop of the trailer settling into its old bones. Then, one night, I noticed a rake. It wasn't dramatic, just something small, almost easy to miss. There was this old wooden rake hanging on a nail outside the back door, weather-worn, missing half its metal teeth. I'd seen it the day I arrived, leaning against the siding under the porch light. It had looked like it had been there for a while, half forgotten and more decorative than useful. But on the third night, it wasn't where I'd seen it. Instead of being under the porch light, it was now hanging on the opposite wall, right beside the back door. Not knocked over, not fallen, just moved. I didn't make a big deal of it. Thought maybe Jules used it before work and stuck it there. Or maybe I'd remembered it wrong. It wasn't like I was keeping a detailed log of lawn tool locations. But then the next night, I went out to grab a bag of chips I'd left in Jules's car, and I stopped short. The rake was standing upright in the middle of the backyard, dead center. Tines planted into the soil like someone had pressed it down with care. It was perfectly vertical, balanced, almost staged. I stared at it for longer than I probably should have, then grabbed it and carried it back to the porch. I didn't even bother trying to hang it up again, just laid it down on its side next to the steps. There wasn't any wind that night. Not even a breeze. I went to bed trying not to overthink it. Around 1 in the morning, I woke up sweating under the covers. The air in the room had turned icy, and when I looked over, I saw the bedroom window was cracked open just a sliver. I hadn't opened it, not even once. I got up to shut it, shivering in my t-shirt, and that's when I noticed the motion sensor light in the backyard was on. It lit up the whole area, washed everything in that bluish artificial glow. I pressed my face to the window. The rake was standing again. This time, closer to the porch, maybe 10 feet away. I just stood there, barely breathing, watching it, waiting for something, anything, to move. The light stayed on for maybe 10 seconds, then clicked off, and the yard dropped into total darkness. I lay back down, pulled the blanket to my chin, and didn't sleep again that night. When Jules got home around sunrise, I told her what I'd seen, half expecting her to laugh, maybe tell me I was dreaming or messing with me. But she didn't laugh. She didn't even look that surprised. Instead, she just kind of nodded and said, "Yeah, that might be old man Hickey." Apparently, her landlord's dad used to live in the trailer before her, lived there alone for years, raking the yard obsessively every November. She said the guy did these long, slow laps around the property, just dragging the rake through the leaves for hours. Didn't talk to neighbors, didn't answer the door, just raked. Then, one year, he slipped on the wet porch steps while heading back inside, broke his neck, died on the spot. I asked if she was serious, and she just shrugged. That's what the landlord told me. Said he still shows up sometimes when the leaves fall heavy. I laughed, because what else do you do? But that night, I locked every door, every window, drew the blinds, and stayed in the living room. I sat there with the lights off, just my laptop screen glowing while some movie I wasn't really watching played in the background. Around 2, the backyard light flicked on again. I didn't check this time. Didn't even move. By the 5th night, the subtle stuff stopped. I'd walked down to the mailbox that afternoon, and when I came back, there was a perfectly round pile of leaves sitting on the welcome mat. Not scattered, not messy. It looked swept, deliberate, centered. There were no trees directly overhead, no wind, no footsteps in the dirt, just the pile. I stared at it, trying to convince myself it was a prank, but no one lived close enough to pull something like that and get away unseen. I kicked the leaves off the mat and went inside, trying to shake the goosebumps crawling up my neck. That night, I decided to stay in Jules's room. She had heavier curtains and a solid lock on her door. I climbed into her bed, kept my hoodie on, and just scrolled aimlessly through my phone to stay awake. Somewhere around 3, the screen door creaked open. Not like the wind caught it. This was slow, heavy, intentional. I froze. No footsteps followed. No voices. Just a soft tapping. It wasn't knocking, more like something brushing against the door in a slow, even rhythm. I sat upright in bed, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might shake the mattress. The tapping kept going. For 10 straight minutes, then nothing. Dead silence. Next morning, Jules stepped out to check the mailbox. Came back holding the rake. Someone had jammed it into the box handle first and bent it nearly in half, like it had been forced in with real effort. It looked like a flagpole marking territory. That was it for me. I told her I wanted to leave. She didn't even ask why, just nodded and helped me pack. We got everything loaded before sunset and left. I'd taken a week off to get out of the city and do some solo hiking. I just wanted to be alone for a bit, breathe some cold air, stretch my legs in a place where no one was watching. There's a trail network near Pine Hill Ridge, just outside of Hartlow, Virginia. I'd been there once years ago with a friend, and I remembered it being quiet, a little underused, and just remote enough to feel like a real escape. No cell service, no busy traffic loops, just long stretches of forest and a few old shelters built decades back by volunteers. One of those trails led to a half-forgotten cabin tucked off an old gravel road, a place hikers could use in emergencies, but that no one officially maintained. That's where I was headed. I parked at a ranger station, signed the logbook, and started hiking with a frame pack, some dried food, and 2 jugs of water. I had everything I needed for 3 or 4 nights, give or take. The air was crisp, sharp enough to bite your throat a little if you breathed too fast. A couple of leaves still clung to the trees, but most of them had fallen, crunching underfoot or swirling ahead of me down the path. I made it to the cabin just before dusk. It sat maybe 200 yards off the main trail, barely visible through a thicket of bare saplings. The roof sagged in the middle, like a heavy hand had pressed down on it. There was a porch, tilted forward on one side, and a busted pump out front that had rusted solid years ago. It looked exactly how I remembered, worn down, but somehow holding itself together. Inside, it smelled like wood smoke and damp earth. There was a cot, a shelf with some old supplies, and a freezer chest in the corner that clearly hadn't worked in years. No lights, no running water. Just a fireplace that still had some ash in it, and a stack of dry kindling in a metal bucket beside it. I lit a small fire, warmed up some food, and sat by the hearth while the last of the light died outside. I wasn't spooked. I actually liked the quiet. It felt like no one could ask me for anything out here. No calls, no emails, no noise except the fire and the occasional pop of a twig outside. I only noticed the photo when I was putting my pack away. It was sitting on the table, a plain wooden frame, maybe 4x6, with a photo of a man squatting beside a buck, one hand gripping the antlers. Standard hunting pose. But it wasn't anyone I knew. And something about the guy's face made my skin crawl. His smile was wide, almost strained, and his eyes were just a little too focused, as if he was staring through the camera rather than at it. The whole expression looked practiced, like he was mimicking how people are supposed to look in pictures. I flipped the frame over. There was a sticker on the back, November 14. That was 2 days away. I set it back down. Didn't think much of it. Figured maybe someone else had left it behind during a previous trip. Weird, sure, but not unexplainable. I went to sleep on the cot, wrapped in a sleeping bag with my headlamp clipped to the edge of my hood. Around 2 in the morning, something woke me up. It was a sound metal on wood, a soft clatter. I sat up, heart already thudding, and listened. Nothing, just the dying crackle of the fire. But when I stepped onto the porch, I saw the rope on the pump gently swaying, like someone had tried to draw water and let go just before I came out. I didn't sleep much after that. I stayed up, poking the fire, sipping water, listening for anything else. The next morning, I opened the old freezer chest. I don't know why, curiosity, I guess. The thing hadn't worked in years. It wasn't plugged in, wasn't even hooked up to anything, but when I opened it, it was full. Wrapped meat. Dozens of pieces, all neatly stacked and wrapped in butcher paper. It looked fresh, no ice, no frost. Just pink edges showing through damp seams in the paper. I backed away from it slowly. Left the lid open. I wasn't about to touch any of it. But something about the smell drifted up as I turned, the faint, unmistakable smell of blood and cold air. I grabbed my pack and went outside. That's when I saw the prints. In the frost on the ground, bare feet. Wide, deep, human-shaped, no shoes, no socks. Just the impression of large, wet feet walking around the cabin. Some stopped at the porch. Others looped through the brush and circled back. They weren't there the night before. I walked the perimeter with a stick in one hand and the bear spray in the other. Nothing moved, not even birds. Just the crunch of frost and the pounding of my own pulse in my ears. That afternoon, I built a fire in the clearing. I dragged a few logs over, burned what little paper I had, and threw in 2 of the wrapped meat packages I'd pulled from the freezer. The flames curled around the paper and licked at the raw flesh underneath. It sizzled, hissed, then blackened. And that's when the wind came. It rose fast, too fast, like something rushing forward all at once. Ash blew straight into my face, stinging my eyes. I dropped the last piece into the fire and turned away, coughing. In the smoke, across the clearing, I saw something move. Not an animal. People. At least 3, standing just behind the tree line, perfectly still. I couldn't make out their faces, couldn't tell if they were clothed, but they didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't blink. They just watched. I didn't leave the cabin that night. I stayed inside with the fireplace burning and my back against the far wall. Every hour or so, I'd hear something bump gently against the wood, not banging, not scratching, just this slow, deliberate pressure, like a shoulder or a chest pressing into the wall. It didn't stop until just before sunrise. When I opened the door the next morning, the frost had melted in human-shaped patches, long, narrow outlines stretched across the clearing. Some had their arms at their sides. Others curled like they'd been sleeping. All of them pointed away from the cabin. In the space between them were bundles of stripped branches, stacked into small pyramids, each one placed neatly. None had been there the day before. I didn't even bother to pack. I grabbed my water, my headlamp, and my wallet, left everything else behind and hiked straight back to the car. Didn't look back, didn't stop. The whole way down, I felt like something was walking parallel to me through the trees, just far enough that I couldn't see it. A week later, I got a call from someone at the ranger station. They'd found my gear, said it looked like I left in a hurry. I'd taken this seasonal job through a conservation nonprofit, part of a program that did trail clearing and ecological maintenance in more remote state-owned forest areas. Most of it was just labor clearing invasive vines, hauling old timber, brushing back overgrowth from long-abandoned hiking paths. The site we were assigned to was way out in the hills of eastern Tennessee, in this dense, barely marked stretch of the Cherokee National Forest. We were told it had been closed to public access since the early 90s. That's all they said. Just that line, like it was a routine maintenance job. I figured it was erosion or storm damage or something. Our crew was small. Just me, a guy named Joel, who was probably in his mid-40s, and a grad student named Rena, doing field hours for her environmental science degree. Joel was quiet but friendly in that dad-ish way, always fiddling with knots and gear. Rena was sharp, funny, kind of intense sometimes, but easy to work with. We got along fine, which was good, because the nearest cell tower was who knows how far, and there wasn't another soul for miles. They housed us in a prefab cabin off a fire road, about 5 miles from the nearest paved highway. No signal, no Wi-Fi. We had a hand crank radio that sometimes picked up local weather broadcasts, but that was about it. Our water came from a pump well out back, and the only bathroom was a composting outhouse a few yards into the woods. No insulation, no heating, just 3 bunks, a propane stove, and enough tools to outfit a lumberjack convention. Our day started early. We'd gear up, hike out to one of the flagged trails on the map, and spend the day sawing, clipping, hauling. The terrain was brutal. Sharp switchbacks, narrow ridgelines, and hollows so deep you could lose sight of the sun by midday. The whole area had this hushed, overgrown feeling, like the forest had been trying to forget people ever came there. The first 2 weeks went by without much to report. Long days, sore backs, and quiet evenings spent reading or playing cards. I actually liked the silence out there. It felt like the world had taken a breath and finally shut up for a while. But then Joel started acting weird. It began with these middle-of-the-night wanderings. I'd hear footsteps outside, slow, deliberate. I assumed it was him heading to the outhouse. But one night, I got up to use the bathroom and noticed him just standing there, right at the edge of the trees. Not moving, not smoking, not doing anything, just staring into the woods. He stood like that for maybe 5 minutes before turning around and walking slowly, really slowly back to the cabin. The next morning I asked if he was all right. He looked pale. He said he hadn't slept. He said he kept hearing footsteps out there, but only when he wasn't looking. I raised an eyebrow and asked if maybe it was deer or coyotes or something. He shook his head. No, it sounds like people, he said, like someone walking right up behind you. But it stops when you turn around. Rena and I kind of side-eyed each other, trying not to laugh. It sounded like sleep deprivation or maybe just nerves from being out there too long. We all tried to brush it off. But I started staying up later after that, not because I believed him, but just in case he wasn't imagining it. One night I heard it too. I was lying in my bunk reading with my headlamp on, and I heard this soft creaking, like weight shifting on the porch. A pause. Then another step, real slow. almost like someone testing the boards. I got up, slipped on my boots, and opened the door. Nothing. Just dark trees and silence. Even the crickets were quiet. I stood there for a bit, breathing in the cold, damp air, then shut the door and went back to bed without saying anything. The next day, we were clearing this tight trail that wound down into a steep hollow. Rena called me over. She'd found something sticking out of the leaf litter looked like the flat face of a rusted iron stove door, maybe 12 inches across. At first, we thought it was just trash, but when we started digging around it, we realized it was attached to a collapsed brick wall sunken into the hillside. No handles, no latch, no visible way to open it. Just that single iron plate, sealed into the bricks, covered in moss and half swallowed by the slope. Joel crouched down to look at it. Didn't say anything, just stared at it for a long minute, then stood up and said he was going to take the long trail back alone. We didn't see him for the rest of the evening. After that, he started skipping meals. He'd sit outside after dark, whispering to himself under his breath. Rena caught a glimpse of his notebook once, just page after page of tight spirals, like black holes drawn in obsessive loops. It looked like something a cartoon character would draw while going crazy in a bunker. We didn't ask. Then came Rena's night. She barged into my room around 4 in the morning, pale and shaking, eyes glassy. Said she'd heard voices outside her window. Not loud, not yelling, just whispering, low and fast, like someone practicing a monologue. She couldn't make out the words, but she said it sounded like they were repeating. The same rhythm, the same cadence, like someone was trying to get it right. I grabbed my flashlight and we checked outside. Nothing again, no tracks, no movement. Joel didn't come back inside that night. We found him the next morning. He was curled up at the bottom of the hill where the iron plate was, arms wrapped around himself, rocking gently. No boots, no gloves. His bare hands were raw and red, nails crusted with dirt. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't look at us, just kept whispering the same line. It's not a door. It's a mouth. It only opens if you stop looking. Rena wanted to leave right then. Just grab what we could and hike out. I told her we should wait one more night. I don't know why I said that. Maybe I thought I'd be able to make sense of it. Maybe I wanted some kind of explanation before we ran. That was the wrong call. That night, around 2 a.m., the generator cut out. The lights died. The cabin went pitch black. At first, it was just the silence. Not even the wind outside, just that thick, suffocating kind of quiet that presses down on your chest. Then I heard the floorboards. Step, pause, step, step, inside, room by room. Slow, careful, like someone checking. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. My hand found the fire axe under my bed and held it tight. I saw something pass by the doorway. A shape, a shadow that shouldn't have been there because there was no light for it to be cast from. It was just darkness, moving. And then it spoke, right outside my door, not loud, not a growl, just a dry, almost flat voice that said one word, twice, follow. It didn't sound like Joel. It didn't sound like anything I recognized. I stayed frozen until dawn. When the sun finally pushed through the cracks in the wall, the shadow was gone. So was Rena. Her bed was made. Her boots were still lined up neatly by the door. Outside on the porch, Joel's notebook was open. Every page was filled with the same sentence, scrawled over and over in crooked, frantic handwriting. Eyes closed at waits, eyes open at watches. I didn't grab my pack. I didn't even take water. I started walking and didn't stop until I hit the highway around mid-afternoon. Some guy in a pickup gave me a ride to a gas station and didn't ask why I smelled like sweat and pine sap and old fear. Now I live in the middle of the city. Full-on concrete jungle. Sirens, people yelling at crosswalks, trash trucks backing up at 3 in the morning. I'll take all of it. My cousin Eli runs this modest little campground off Route 46, way out where West Virginia and Kentucky kind of melt into each other. I took a week off that November to help him shut it down for the season. Nothing official, just clearing brush, stacking wood, sealing up the cabins, The tourists were long gone by then. Eli had this busted old school bus parked out at the edge of the property that he gutted and fixed up like a hunting cabin. It had propane heat, a cot, a tiny counter, and not much else. No cell service, no Wi-Fi. If you needed anything, you walked the quarter-mile up to Eli's trailer or figured it out yourself. I didn't mind. It felt good to unplug for a bit. On my second night there, I was out by the old fire ring, clearing some brush while the light held. It was that dusky part of the day when everything feels a little sideways. I wasn't thinking much, just dragging branches around, when I saw this leafless tree that looked weirdly familiar. It had a busted-off limb near the top and this knot on the trunk that kind of looked like an eye socket. Creepy, but whatever. Then, maybe 10 minutes later, I saw it again. Same tree, same shape, same knot, except I'd been walking downhill in a straight line. There was no way I should have looped back around. I even looked at my footprints. They were all pointing the same direction. I stopped and turned to look behind me. That's when I noticed things looked off. Not dramatic, just wrong enough to make your stomach shift. There was a rusted-out barrel tucked under a pine I didn't remember. A crushed beer can in the grass that hadn't been there. The paths that should have crisscrossed back toward camp were gone. Just trees. And no sound. Eli had been using his chainsaw earlier, but now there was nothing. Not even birds. I called his name. Got nothing. Just wind in the branches. I started back uphill fast, but the place didn't untangle. Every few minutes I'd see something familiar, but not in the right place. The same slope, again. The same twisted log. Then, finally, a flash of silver. Just the edge of the bus roof catching the last light. Maybe 50 yards off, up a steep incline. I didn't think. I ran for it. That night, I stayed inside. Kept the lantern on low. I tried reading, but my ears kept picking up this soft brushing noise outside. At first, I figured it was just the wind knocking dry leaves against the siding, but there were moments, small ones, when it sounded more like footsteps, dragging, slow, not consistent. I turned off the lantern at one point and just sat there in the dark, listening. I counted 32 seconds between two of the sounds. Same spot on the left side of the bus. Then silence. I didn't sleep much. Just waited it out until I saw daylight hitting the ridge. Next morning, Eli took one look at me and said, "You look like you slept in a ditch." I told him about the tree, the one that showed up twice, and how the woods felt like they were folding in on themselves. I expected him to make fun of me. He didn't. He just nodded, like I'd told him the water in the shower ran cold, then said, "You ever hear the name Fledermaus?" I shook my head. He was quiet for a second, then said, real calm, "It ain't a person." Eli never stopped working while he talked. He was sharpening a hatchet on this flat river stone, eyes down, just kept that rhythm going. He said it like he was telling me something useful, not trying to scare me. "Old name," he went on. "Folks around here used to whisper it. Fledermaus is a walker. Not a ghost, not an animal, something that don't go by the usual rules. It can't cross water, but the woods don't hold it. Distance doesn't mean much to it. It shows up where it wants." I remember feeling cold even with the sun out. He glanced up just briefly and said, "Thing is, it doesn't like being known. You gotta stay seen, stay accounted for." Then he handed me this little round tin, light as air. Inside was black powder, looked like charcoal dust. "If you feel it again," he said, "mark your face. Let it know you know." I gave a kind of half laugh and stuck the tin in my jacket pocket. Didn't really believe it, but I wasn't going to be rude about it either. That night, Eli went over to his girlfriend's place, left me on my own again. I built a fire outside the bus, tried to keep it going strong, sat with a thermos, and watched the flames dance around. It was quiet for a while. Peaceful, even. Then the fire started to die down. I got up to grab more wood from the pile near the trees. As I turned back, arms full, I saw something across the fire. It was standing maybe 20 feet away, not moving, watching. I couldn't make out the face exactly, but the body was shaped like a man, just wrong. Hunched, arms a little too long, feet turned in, like the legs didn't know which way to stand. No color. Not the clothes, not the skin, just gray. Like it didn't belong to light at all. We stared at each other. I didn't breathe. I didn't even blink. Then I dropped the wood. Not on purpose, my hands just gave out. I backed up, slow, toward the bus. My heel hit a root, and I went down hard. Gravel tore into my palms. I looked up. It was closer. I scrambled inside and slammed the door. The curtain on the window was pushed open. I was sure I'd closed it. Didn't matter. I didn't look outside again. I just grabbed the tin, opened it with shaking hands, and smeared that charcoal across my cheeks, forehead, whatever. I didn't care how it looked. I just needed it on. There were no more sounds that night. No more footsteps. But I stayed up anyway, waiting for the light. At dawn, I stepped out. The pile of firewood I dropped? Gone. All of it. All of it. Not a stick left. I didn't bring it up to Eli. Thought maybe I'd imagined more than I realized. But later that night, he asked if I used the tin. Just like that. Like he already knew. I told him, yeah, I did. I wasn't sure if it helped. He just said keep it close. November's when it wakes up most. On the last morning, I woke up with a nosebleed and a sharp ache in my knees like I'd run miles in my sleep. My boots were soaked with dew, but I hadn't stepped outside. Before I left, Eli walked me out past the main camp, down a slope I'd never noticed before. At the bottom, tucked between two hills, was a wide, blackened stump. It was hollow, charred inside, and full of old nails. Bits of animal bones were laid out along the roots like someone had arranged them on purpose. That's where it got its name, he said. Some folks think it came out of there. Others think that's where it was sealed back up. I left before the sun touched the ridge and drove the whole way home without stopping.